Okay, we're now live on the YouTube, so we need to start. I would like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who are watching the live stream of this meeting via the Council's website. Members, you're aware by now of the need to keep your video camera switched on for the duration of the meeting and to keep your microphone muted, except when I invite you to speak. Please click the raised hand function if you wish to speak. Can I remind you that there will be no points of order or personal explanation. I will also remind you that there's always a risk that we may run into technical problems, and I would ask for your patience if we do. Should this occur, I will declare an adjournment while the fault is addressed, and the public broadcast will be paused. If it is not possible to address the fault, the meeting may be abandoned until such times as it can be reconvened. Can I remind members and public speakers that all virtual meetings will be recorded and that these recordings will be published on the Council's website. Members, I will begin by calling your names to establish your presence. Please confirm you're present either by saying present or here. Please do it loud enough so that we can all hear. Okay, Councillor David Ambrose Smith.
Present.
Councillor Barbara Ashwood.
Present.
Councillor Anna Bailey.
Present.
Councillor Henry Batchelor.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Ian Bates.
Present.
Councillor Chris Bowden.
Present.
Councillor Anna Bradnam.
Present.
Councillor Simon Bywater.
Present.
Councillor David Connor.
Present.
Councillor Della Costello.
Present.
Councillor Steve Count.
Present.
Councillor Sandra Crawford.
Present.
Councillor Steve Criswell.
Present.
Councillor Kevin Cuffley.
Present.
Councillor Peter Downs.
Present.
Councillor Lorna Dupre.
Present.
Councillor Liz Every.
Present.
Councillor Jan French.
Present.
Councillor Ryan Fuller.
Present.
Councillor Ian Gardner.
Present.
Councillor Derek Giles. Councillor Derek Giles. Councillor Mark Goldsack.
Present.
Councillor John Gowing.
Present.
Councillor Linda Harford.
Present.
Councillor Nicola Harrison.
Present.
Councillor Anne Hay.
Present.
Councillor Roger Hickford.
Present.
Councillor Mark Howell.
Present.
Councillor Sam Hoy.
Present.
Councillor Peter Hudson.
Present.
Councillor Bill Hunt. Councillor Bill Hunt. Councillor Bill Hunt.
Present.
Councillor David Jenkins.
Present.
Councillor Linda Jones. Councillor Linda Jones.
Present.
Councillor Noel Kavanagh.
Present.
Councillor Sebastian Kindersley.
Good morning.
Councillor Simon King.
Present.
Councillor Ian Manning.
Present.
Councillor Peter MacDonald.
Present, Chair.
Myself, Councillor Matt Maguire, present. Councillor Eliza Machini.
Present.
Councillor Lucy Nisinga.
Present.
Councillor Lena Nieto.
Present.
Councillor Kevin Reynolds.
Present.
Councillor Terry Rogers.
Present.
Councillor Tom Sanderson.
Present, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Josh Schumann. We have had apologies from him. Councillor Jocelyn Scott.
Yes, here.
Councillor Mike Shellings. We have had apologies from him. Councillor Matthew Shooter.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Mandy Smith.
Present.
Councillor Amanda Taylor. Councillor Amanda Taylor.
Present.
Councillor Steve Tierney.
Present.
Councillor Susan van der Ven.
Present.
Councillor David Wells,
Present.
Councillor Joan Whitehead,
Present.
Councillor John Williams,
Present.
Councillor Graham Wilson,
Present.
Councillor Julie Wisson,
Present.
Councillor Tim Wotherspoon.
Present.
I'm going to go back to Councillor Giles because I don't think we got a response. At least I didn't hear it. Councillor Giles.
Chairman, we're actually contacting him to find out what the problem is.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to apologies, we've received apologies from Councillors Claire Richards, Simone Taylor, Councillor Mike Shellens and Councillor Josh Schumann, who may be able to join us later. Do we have any others, Michelle?
None that I'm aware of, Chairman.
Thank you. I'll move us now on to the minutes. Item 1, we are being asked to approve the minutes of the meeting on the 19th of May of this year as a correct record. Can I ask any member who does not agree with this proposal to click the raised hand function on the right of your screen now? Right. I see no objections to the proposal to approve the minutes as a correct record, so we'll take that as carried. Moving on to item 2, which is Chairman's announcements. I have 2 announcements to make today. Today, I'd like to announce the start of a scheme for this council to formally recognise the efforts of individuals, community, volunteer groups and businesses for the additional support they have provided across Cambridgeshire since the national pandemic was recognised. The scheme, which has the support of all group leaders, gives all of our elected members the opportunity to put forward suggestions of people in their own divisions whose efforts are worthy of receiving an official chairman.
I'm just going to get a bit of paper. So I've got something to surround that with lights on.
Amanda.
Sorry, somebody come. All right, I'll just repeat the last paragraph. Somebody talked across me then. The scheme, which has support of all group leaders, gives all of our elected members the opportunity to put forward suggestions of people in their own division whose efforts are worthy of receiving an official chairman's commendation. Further details of the scheme and how members can nominate individuals or businesses for it will be sent to all members this week. I was delighted to be able to mark Armed Forces Week by showing my appreciation via video to the men and women who are serving or who have served in the military, many of whom are amongst our own staff. Armed Forces Week is a chance to show support for currently serving troops, including reservists, as well as veterans, cadets, and their families. Cambridgeshire County Council is amongst the signatories to the Armed Forces Covenant, a commitment from public and private organisations to support the active and retired Armed Forces community. That concludes the announcements for today. I'd now like to move us on to item 3, which is declarations of interest.
Chairman, can I just interrupt you and say that Councillor Giles has now joined us?
Okay, and his presence has been noted then. Thank you. Welcome, Councillor Giles. So now on declarations of interest. Next is an item on declaration.
Can I just declare an interest there, Chairman? Sorry, I did put my hand up. Can I just declare an interest under item 8B?
Mandy, yes. Councillor Smith, can you just hold on till I read the bit out and then we'll have the opportunity to come in and do that. All right. So the next item is an item on declarations of interest. Under this item, members are asked to declare interest under the Code of Conduct in any item on the agenda for today's meeting if they are not registered on the Register of Interests. The following members and substitutes of Planning Committee have an interest in agenda item number 8, brackets A. The motion from Councillor Tierney. The host of this meeting will therefore be removing you from the meeting when we get to this item in order to avoid predetermination if the project is downsized or another EFW proposal comes forward. Planning Committee members Ashwood, Connor, Gardner, Harford, Hunt, Kindersley, Scott and Smith, and substitute members Batchelor, Bradnam, Crawford, Fuller, Gowing, Howell, Hudson, Jenkins, Jones and Kavanagh. I've been informed that Councillor Tim Wotherspoon, Vice Chairman of Environment and Sustainability Committee, has chosen to also lead the meeting for this item, as the Executive Director of Place and Economy will be consulting the Chair and Vice Chair of this committee on any delegated decision. I understand Councillor Smith has a non-statutory disclosable interest in relation to agenda item number 8B. Councillor Smith, can you now declare your interest, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry. Basically, can I declare an interest in item 8B, the motion declared by Councillor Peter MacDonald as my partner as a farmer?
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Right, I'll now move us on to public question time, since I've not seen any indications of other interest being shown. As I say, item 4 is public question time, which allows for members of the public to ask questions at the council meeting, provided that they have given advance notice. No questions were notified by the deadline. Moving on to petitions. Item 5 is on petitions and allows members of the public to present petitions in accordance with the agreed protocol. The petition calling on the council to take all steps within its powers to ensure that public access to Wessex footpath by way of the current permissive rights be protected in perpetuity was received by the deadline to allow a spokesperson to speak and contains over 50 signatures. The petition organizer or the nominee will be able to speak at the meeting. Details of the petition have been circulated electronically to all members and published on the council's website. Could I now ask Dr. Leslie Dee to speak to the petition? Dr. Dee, you have 3 minutes. Dr. Dee, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning in support of the Wessex Place footpath petition, which attracted 564 signatures. I'd like to remind you, first of all, of what we're trying to achieve. I want to present some statistical evidence in support of our petition, and finally give some reasons why we believe that the footpath should remain open for public access. What do we want? In the light of the decision to lease Shire Hall and the surrounding buildings to private developers, we are requesting that the County Council finds a legal way to protect public access to the footpath in perpetuity. The footpath provides an important link between the communities of North Cambridge and the rest of the city, leading from McGrath Avenue to Castle Hill and the city centre. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with the path, it is paved, well maintained, and has concrete steps up to the Shire Hall level, with a cycle ramp and a rail to assist those who need it. There's no doubt that the path is very well used. We've conducted 2 surveys of use of the footpath by cyclists and pedestrians, one in 2011 and a second in November 2019. We found that there's been a substantial increase in its use. In 2011, the average number of journeys made based on a sample of 5 hours at different times of the day found that 1.6 journeys were made per minute. In 2019, the average was just over 2 journeys per minute. So apart from the obvious fact that the path is very well used, why else should it remain open? First, it provides a much safer option for parents, children and others than having to use the busy and polluted A roads that surround this area, the A routes, particularly of Victoria and Chesterton roads. Secondly, it supports the use of sustainable methods of transport. Cambridge City Council policy and indeed national policies are now weighted firmly in favour of walking and cycling, and it would appear counterintuitive to make these activities more difficult. It also offers quick access for several hundred local households to the important bus routes that, including the guided bus that go down Castle Hill. Thirdly, it provides access to local amenities, workplaces, the churches of St Giles and St Luke's, including their school and nursery, local shops, pubs, the colleges, and the green space, including Castle Mound, as well as the city centre. Finally, the route is part of the local history of this neighbourhood. It's provided access to Castle Hill since 1934 and has been an official pathway since 1979. In conclusion, we are asking the City Council on behalf of the many people who use this footpath every day to ensure that access to this invaluable pathway is maintained in perpetuity. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. D. Thank you for the petition. I will be writing to you after the council meeting with the council's response. Members are advised that there is no specific debate on the petition.
Thank you, Chair.
Dr. D. Next is item 6, Treasury Management Report. Q4 update for 2019 to 2020 on pages 10 to 12 of the agenda. Can I ask the Chairman of the General Purposes Committee, Councillor Count, to move the recommendation as set out in the report be adopted, and to invite the Vice Chairman, Councillor Hickford, to second. Councillor Count.
Thank you, Chairman. I shall move the report, and subsequently, if you can confirm that Councillor Hickford will be my seconder. The Treasury Management Q4 recommendations come from the General Purposes Committee, and normally at full council, this is a very simple report for us to note, having examined it fully. However, under this today, there are some variations where under B, we're asked to agree some amendments to the Treasury Management Strategy, which are set out in the report, and delegate any other consequential or technical amendments associated with multi-class credit to the Chief Finance Officer. The reasons are fully set out in the report, but I wish to touch on some of them. At General Purposes Committee, we were appraised of a selection process for the selection process of a multi-class credit fund manager, and that it was likely the investment will require amendment to the Treasury Management Strategy, including a specific listed delegation to the manager to be appointed. Previously, the Council had been proceeding on the basis that such an investment would be classified as capital expenditure, whereas further external advice means we have included the statement at 2.6 that this is not capital. The type of investment means deploying some of the cash flows available to the Council into a fund managed by an external investment manager across a mixed portfolio of government and corporate debt in order to achieve an improved yield or return over the medium or longer term, whilst carefully balancing this against ensuring funds held by the Council are secure. The restrictions and monitoring of these more liquid classes are handled by the amendments to the Treasury Management Strategy as set out in paragraph 2.4, including reference to the Commercial and Investment Committee's setting up of the investment group. Since June, the Commercial and Investment Committee has further considered this prospect in further detail and selected its preferred fund and the asset class identified in paragraph 2.5. The fund manager, Alliance Global Investors GmbH at 2.7, was selected after the Commercial and Investment Committee benefited from advice from an external expert firm of advisors. The fund selected has the highest level of environmental, social, and governance factors with the strictest level of exclusions. Outside of the recommendations relating to this asset class, the rest of our Treasury Update report remains in its same format, including an interesting section on the economic climate viewed through a lens that, only a few months old, reports on a world immensely changed from that of today. The full extent of those amendments are included in the Council report in front of you, and I commend both recommendations A and B to the Council for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Count. Councillor Hickford, do you wish to second the motion?
Thank you, Chair. I'm very happy to second this motion and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. The opportunity now exists to debate this proposal. No. Oh, Councillor Dupre, I can see your hand.
Thank you very much, Chairman. At the General Purposes Committee meeting on the 2nd of June, where this was presented, we were assured that there were no implications arising from this report for the Council's net zero carbon by 2050 commitment. The head of finance at that time agreed to investigate whether this meant the Council did not invest in fossil fuels. On the 14th of July, the General Purposes Committee was told that presently the Council's only Treasury investments are managed by CCLA Investment Management Limited, and presented a link to their policy. And their policy says, we do not invest our client's asset in companies that have been identified by our third-party data provider, MSCI, as generating more than 5% of their returns from the extraction of energy, coal or tar sands. It also says that recognizing the specifics of the asset class, CCLA does not provide direct capital through our fixed interest funds to companies that derive more than 10% of their revenue from the extraction and or refining of fossil fuels. In extremis, this rule can be overridden if the proceeds of the fixed interest security are explicitly tied to assisting the company in transitioning to a net zero economy. In view of this, officers said that they considered that these investments accorded with seeking net zero carbon emissions for Cambridgeshire by 2050. We were promised on the 14th of July a briefing, and we have yet to receive that briefing with more detail about the extent to which policies accord with our own policies. And I don't feel comfortable voting for this while we have not had that briefing, and while we have not yet had the opportunity for potential review by the Environment and Sustainability Committee. I think there is a big issue here for the Council, given its new commitment on zero carbon by 2050, to review and consider the extent to which it's investing correctly with regard to that policy and that commitment. And I therefore don't feel comfortable at this stage supporting this report until we have had the chance to explore those issues in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dupre. I don't see any other hands up for anybody else wishing to speak. You just confirm that, Michelle, or no, I can't see any others. So we now need to move to, sorry, before we do that, Councillor Hickford, do you wish to respond?
I have nothing further to add, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, I have to confess I was hoping that we would have got a general consensus on this, but I gather from what Councillor Dupre says he doesn't want to support it, so therefore we're going to have to move to a vote on this.
Chairman, I think Councillor Count has the right of reply.
Of course, yes, thank you for reminding me. So I'm thinking that. Councillor Count, do you wish to come in at this stage?
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman, and I take on board the comments that Councillor Dupre has raised. However, she is confusing the responses from the GPC committee and the two separate funds that are spoken about. So the question at the GPC committee was about existing investments and how they were invested, and the response particularly replied to the only type of investment that could be classified in that as part of that question as the funds managed by the CCLA. That CCLA is specifically aimed at local authorities and is only open to public sector clients and overseen by an LGA nominated board. The CCLA manages its assets in accordance with the 5 strands of their climate change and investment policy, including avoiding investment in companies in the most exposed sectors and dedicating funds to accelerating the low carbon economy. So the response at GPC and the further briefing was in relation to that fund. This fund has some exclusions, such as exclusions, production, extraction of tobacco, alcohol, gambling, pornography, coal and weapons, etc. I would go on to add that when we talk about whether it's the primary business or whether it's 10%, for example, if you take about fuel, for example, one of the examples I heard when I was on the pensions committee years ago was, would you invest in Tesco's? Not necessarily because they've got petrol stations, making it dubious as to whether you would say they're in the fuel industry or not, but because they have cigarettes behind their counter, and therefore are you promoting tobacco by investing in a company as large as Tesco? And many of the funds that are invested in are actually of such a size that to actually say that there will be no involvement in any industry whatsoever becomes very hard to manage. However, as I pointed out into my opening statement, the fund manager that we selected scored highest in environmental concerns. So I'm very confident that this is the right approach for this council in trying to achieve our net carbon zero 2050 targets at this point in time. So I stick with my original commendation to ask this council to fully support recommendations in A and B. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Kent. We will now have to move to vote. Michelle, can you remind me, according to my notes, we would normally call out names here, but are we going to use the voting system proposed?
Yes, yes, Chair. If it's okay with the council, the proposal is to use the electronic poll, which we will start now. So you should see that coming up in front of you. Members in favour of the motion, please click the buttons marked for and submit. Members against the motion, please click the buttons marked against and submit. Members wishing to abstain, please click the buttons marked abstain and submit. And now I'm going to hand over to the host, who will confirm that everyone has voted. We'll then close the vote and then we'll announce the result.
Michelle, I have no buttons. Nothing's come up.
Sorry,
Nothing's come up for me either.
So you don't have anything in front of you. Can I just check whether that's just Councillor Wisson and Councillor Hay?
I've got 55, sorry, have now voted.
So it does appear to be Councillor Wisson and Hay.
Leave, Michelle, it's now come up for me.
Okay, great. Councillor Wisson, has it come up for you?
Nope.
I suggest we can ask Councillor Wisson how she wishes to vote.
Yes.
Councillor Wisson, how do you wish to vote? For or against or abstain?
I wish to vote for.
Thank you.
I'll end the vote. So the results of the vote are 40 votes in favour, 16 abstentions, or 41 votes in favour, sorry, and 16 abstentions. Therefore, the motion's carried.
Okay, I can see everything on the screen here. Saying that, well, it gives me percentages. What it doesn't tell me is who abstained. Nobody's voted against. Okay, so therefore the vote is carried. Thank you. Now move us on to item 7. Apologies if I'm hesitating because I'm looking at two.
Apologies, Chair. Can I just interrupt? There is a requirement to actually list how the groups voted in the Constitution. So I'd therefore be grateful if you would check with the group leaders and the two independent members how they voted.
Thanks for reminding me of that, Michelle. That was agreed, but I got thrown by the fact there was nobody voted against. It was all abstentions. The others were abstentions. So can I just make the assumption, group leaders, can I assume that the Conservatives voted in favour, that the Lib Dems and probably Labour abstained? Can you confirm that? Steve Count, can you confirm the group voted in favour?
Yes, Councillor Maguire, I can confirm after listening to the debate, my group made the right decision and voted for this.
Thank you. Is it Councillor Dupre or are you?
Councillor Singer.
Lib Dems?
You're mute, Lucy. I'd like to confirm that given our misgivings about investments in fossil fuels, our group abstained on that vote.
Councillor Machini.
Yes, the advice to the Labour group was to vote in favour of this, and this is what I believe my colleagues have done.
So thank you. So the Conservatives and Labour voted in favour and the Lib Dems abstained. Okay.
And the independent councillors?
Oh, independents, all right, forgot. Independence, Councillor.
I can confirm, Mr. Chairman, I abstained, but of course, being independents, we may not always vote together, so I'm not actually sure how Councillor Giles cast his vote. Maybe he can confirm.
No, there you go, Michelle, because I wasn't going to ask individuals how they voted, but
No, I voted for, Chairman.
all right. So the independents had a split vote on that one. Thank you. You content, Michelle?
Thank you.
We've properly recorded. Okay, right. Looking at the other screen now. So moving us on to item 7, which is recommendations to full council from the Constitution and Ethics Committee. The report on pages 13 to 14 is on the decision review process. Can I ask the chairwoman of the Constitution and Ethics Committee, Councillor Every, to move the recommendations as set out in the report to be adopted? And then I'm going to assume that Councillor Reynolds will second it, but he'll come in due course. Councillor Every. Councillor Every, are you able to hear me?
She's muted.
Sorry, Councillor Maguire, sorry. Thank you, Chair. I move that the recommendations as set out in the report are adopted and confirm the Vice Chair, Councillor Reynolds, will second. This comes before full council to consider changes to the decision review procedure as set out in the Council's constitution following a decision at the recent Constitution and Ethics Committee, and there are 2 recommendations: that the Council approves an increase in the number of members of General Purposes Committee required to initiate a review of the decision taken by a Policy and Service Committee from 8 to 9, and B, authorises the monitoring officer in consultation with the chairwoman of the Constitution and Ethics Committee to make any other minor or consequential amendments to the Constitution necessary for or incidental to the implementation of these proposals. And I'd just like to refer to A. At present, 8 members of the General Purposes Committee may initiate a review of the decision taken by a Policy and Service Committee by submitting a request for review to the Monitoring Office or Chief Executive before the expiry of 3 full working days from the date on which the decision notice was published. This was based on half the membership of the committee, i.e. 15, following the decision of the full council on the 19th of May 2020 to increase the membership of General Purposes Committee to 17. It was agreed that the figure for initiating a review should be increased to 9. I therefore commend both recommendations to the council for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Every. Councillor Reynolds, you wish to second?
Chairman, I so second.
Do you wish to speak now?
I reserve my right to speak if I may, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Kindersley.
Thank you, Chairman. It's with regret that we didn't support this recommendation at Constitution and Ethics, and we continue not to support it. The whole decision review process is so very heavily weighted against any decision ever being reviewed by the Constitution as it currently sits, that what we are in fact doing or being asked to agree today is to make a vanishingly small chance of any decision review ever taking place even more vanishingly small. And it's a shame, I think, that the leadership has not taken the opportunity to shine a small light of optimism to opposition members that there is a chance at some point in the future that a decision might be subject to the review process. So it is for that reason that we're not supporting the recommendation at A. Obviously, recommendation at B is perfectly acceptable. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Kindersley. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Chair. The Labour Group will not be supporting this either. I mean, in some respects, it's a bit of a futile gesture because whether it's 8 or 9 people on the General Purposes Committee who ask for a review, the chances, as Councillor Kindersley is saying, of such a review coming forward are vanishingly small. The democratic process was subverted when we took away the right of council members, a portion of the full council, to call in a matter for review. That was regrettable, and it is, to me, very disappointing that Constitution and Ethics have not decided to allow the democratic right of members of the council full council to actually call in or to ask to be reconsidered a decision made by a committee. That was when the step was taken, which removed substantial rights from members of the council. So whether it's 8 or 9 is neither here nor there really, but as a gesture of our protest against the decision to make it only a matter for the General Purposes Committee, we will vote against this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to endorse what both Councillor Whitehead and Councillor Kindersley have said, and to make 2 short points, if I may. One, councillors who were on members from 2013 to 2017 will remember the power of the call-in in relation to the 3rd floor of the Central Library, and that was a very good process that operated at that time, and it is indeed disappointing, or more sadly negative to the democratic process, that that is no longer the case. The second point I would like to make is that at the Constitution and Ethics Committee on that occasion that this decision was made, another decision was made, and that was against the proposal that the Environment and Sustainability Committee have an overarching role in terms of the operations of the council through other committees, so that the Environment and Sustainability Committee would be able to have an insight into the environmental and sustainability impact of decisions of other committees. Now, why I'm raising that here is that that would have been one way in which we could have ensured as a council that the climate change emergency motion that we passed could have had some real impact. However, we're deprived of that possibility, and we're deprived of possibility of call-in in relation to that important issue by this motion, which simply makes more telling the power of the ruling group to simply rule as it wishes to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. I see no other hands raised. So, Councillor Reynolds, do you wish to come in at this point?
Chairman, nothing more to add really. I need to make an observation in that calling was part of the old cabinet system along with Pacific scrutiny committees. And at the request of members, we changed over to the committee system where it was implicit that each committee acted in its own scrutiny role. So I don't really see what the problem was. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Councillor Every, just to...
No, nothing further to add. Thank you, Chair.
In that case, we'll move to the vote. Ms. Rowe, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, members, you will see a vote come up. I'll just wait for it to come up on the screen. Right. Members in favour of the motion, please click the buttons marked for and submit. Members against the motion, please click the buttons marked against and submit. Members wishing to abstain, please click the buttons marked abstain and submit. Can I just check whether Councillor Wilson, you still have the same problem?
Yeah, I have no buttons.
Okay, the chairman we will check how you vote before closing.
Thank you.
That's 56 have voted now, so I'll close the poll.
So can I just check, Councillor Wilson, how you wish to vote?
Can I vote in favour, please? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's now closing the vote. So it's 34 in favour, 22 against, and 1 abstention. Therefore, it's carried.
Thank you. Can I now confirm with the leaders that the Conservatives have voted for, Labour and Lib Dems have voted against. Independents, I wonder if you're able to give me an input.
I voted against, Mr. Chairman.
I voted to abstain, Chairman.
Right, the independents split vote. Do you need any more information, Michelle, or are you content?
No, that's fine, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Next item is item 8, which is written motions. 4 motions have been submitted. Although the first motion has been submitted by Councillor Tierney, I propose to move it to the end of the agenda as a number of members have interest in this item and need to leave the meeting. So rather than for them to have to leave and then come back again, we're going to, as I say, move it to the end. So we now move to the second motion submitted by Councillor MacDonald. Can I ask Councillor MacDonald to move and speak to his motion as set out on pages 5 to 6 of the agenda?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to introduce the motion as per the council paper. In 6 months' time, there'll be a very significant deadline when we end the transition period of Brexit. And at that time, the regulatory alignment with the EU on food standards will essentially end. So thinking about farmers in the UK, including our tenants in Cambridgeshire, they've played on a level playing field across Europe and with trading partners outside of the EU, sending food and food products to Europe. And so these farmers will be in an entirely new regime. In a no-deal situation, which obviously all of us hope will be avoided, WTO will govern tariffs, but not food standards. In Cambridgeshire, the Spear report identified that agriculture was a key part of our economy. Farmers here, many of whom are our tenants on our 33,000 acres of farmland, fear that as part of the trade bill negotiations with the US and other markets, that lower standards would be accepted, thus allowing food to be imported into the UK, produced to a lower standard that our own growers have to adhere to. As the motion states, we recognise and very much welcome by the government the establishment of the new Trade and Agricultural Standards Commission. However, this commission must have teeth. Accordingly, I ask you to support a motion to create statutory powers for the commission. To quote the president of the NFU, taking back control means an independent trade policy which works for workers, businesses and consumers. But that taking back of control is meaningless if our sovereign parliament isn't given a clear voice on whether trade deals meet these outcomes. Our trade partners will be giving their parliaments the final say on trade deals, and many of them have commissions, and we must do likewise. In our democracy, other commissions such as the Charity Commission, the Gambling Commission, the Law Commission, the Children's Commissioner, and the Equalities and the Human Rights Commission all have statutory powers. What greater need of a commission with statutory powers than for the food that we eat? People, Chairman, in my view, didn't vote to take back control from the EU simply to hand that to another country. The ideal model is a parliament which scrutinises the trade deals and a commission which monitors and implements the agreed standards. Therefore, I hope members can support the motion for the benefit of our Cambridgeshire farmers and beyond. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Councillor MacDonald, do you have a seconder for your motion?
Yes, Councillor Bradnam, please.
Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you.
Second now.
I'm happy to second this motion, Chairman, and I'm happy to speak now.
So please go ahead.
Thank you. So having worked and still working in some ways in the agricultural seed industry, I'm very happy to second this motion. In my view, it's essential to be able to maintain our high standards of food production comparative so that it's comparable across the UK and the EU and the US, wherever we trade with. But this is to protect our farmers, to ensure that the high standards that they apply are also required in the countries with which we trade. This means maintaining welfare standards that we apply to our grain, but also to our livestock, our milk, and other foods. So in my experience in the seed trade, we know that international standards ensured that, for example, agricultural varieties are distinct, uniform and stable, but also ensure that seed meets minimum standards for germination, as well as freedom from contamination with other species and weeds. Let's be clear, this kind of care takes time, money and care to ensure that our products are up to the standards that we require. It requires time to train people to understand the standards and apply them appropriately. It takes money to ensure that our crops are produced to the very high standards that we require. And also it takes care. Our farmers are experienced in producing the products that we produce, and it's their care and attention to detail that ensures the standards that we deliver our food to. So our farmers must not be put in a position where food is produced elsewhere under conditions that we would not allow for our poultry, sheep or cattle, or indeed our grain, but those products from elsewhere are allowed to undercut the food produced wholesomely in Cambridgeshire and the UK. So please support this bill. We must encourage the Secretary of State to support the setting up of a Trade and Agriculture Commission, as my colleague Councillor MacDonald has advised, to protect the interests of our farmers in Cambridgeshire and indeed all over the UK. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bradnam. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. We in the Labour Group support this motion. I note that the Trade Bill 2020 was before the Parliament yesterday for the third reading, but it is not too late to proceed, of course, with this motion before the Council. Concerns have been raised in the community that are very strong in terms of what will happen after we leave the EU, particularly in terms of the agricultural economy. Agriculture is fundamental to our economy in both the production of food and the creation of jobs, and it's vital that those be preserved and that we make clear our support for this field of endeavour. Also, of course, in terms of the products, people raising concerns about the prospects of chlorinated chicken, the prospects of genetic farming, both in terms of animals and in plant production, and are adamantly opposed to that. And we do need to ensure that the standards, the high standards that have been preserved in our agricultural industry can continue to be preserved. In terms of the Agriculture Commission, we would simply say this, that we agree with the motion that the terms of the Agriculture Commission should be made statutorily, should be statutorily endorsed. We do note, however, that there is a concern that the powers will be advisory only, and from our perspective, it's important that they not be advisory only, but that this commission have the power to make determinations in terms of the level of the various levels that are created within this field. And I also just simply want to finalise by saying that the membership of the Commission is vital. It should not be dominated by business, and nor should it be dominated by corporate farmers. We believe that the small farming industry is vital as well, and also the consumer representation should be sufficient so that small farmers and consumer representation have a large voice on this Commission, and one that is not drowned out by dominant business or corporate farming. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you, Chairman. There's an old saying that says good things come to those that wait, and I think this applies very well to this motion. I'm sure that the intended approach from Councillor MacDonald, a local councillor who no doubt knows his onions in the field of agriculture, was to highlight the Conservative government's position as to the Trade and Agricultural Commission having not yet been created, whilst leaving the EU in 6 months' time. However, since the writing of the motion, and despite fighting a global pandemic, delivering financial packages the like of which have never been seen to support our nation's businesses, maintaining law and order at times of Black Lives Matter protests, reverse beach invasions, and even the personally dreaded Liverpool Premiership win. Our Conservative government has once again delivered on a promise. The Trade and Agricultural Standards Board Commission has been not just agreed, but has been much heralded by NFU President Minette Batters. She is quoted as saying, "This government announcement is a hugely important development which addresses a crucial element of a much broader challenge in ensuring the UK's trade policy delivers a prosperous and sustainable future for UK agriculture." So I think we can agree we're meeting the NFU's demands. Sometimes I personally feel that a little more direct in our laws and a little more prescriptive in our descriptions, but throughout the last 6 months of government, the precedent has been to allow the UK people to work within a set of practicing guidelines. Well, in agriculture and farming, this is exactly the right thing to do. This council is blessed with the most fantastic farms and rural estate. It encompasses over 33,000 acres and over 200 farm tenants. These people are experts literally in their fields and have been producing arable and livestock-based products to the highest global standards across the world. To think that awaiting for the formation of a commission would herald a sprint to the lowest levels of quality to successfully fight off the much heralded attack of the chlorinated chicken, steroid-laden beef or genetically modified loaf of bread, I'm afraid is fanciful. Our farmers are vastly passionate in what they do. Our farmers are totally focused on the quality aspects of what they do, delivering potatoes to customers like McCain's and having a lorry load returned for not meeting the exacting standards, and had returned at the farmer's expense really focuses the mind of producing the highest quality product. In short, our farmers know exactly what to do. Our farmers developed and now adhere to the Red Tractor scheme, recognised as being the highest, if not the highest quality control scheme across the world. And please let me make it absolutely clear, the UK quality levels are significantly higher than those adopted by the EU. The Common Agricultural Policy was about protectionism and control. Under the newly formed Trade and Agricultural Commission, we now have the blank sheet of paper needed to bring producer closer to consumer. This is what the NFU want to see. This is what our farmers want to see. And guess what? This is what the UK consumers want to see. It's no coincidence that when people attend local farmers markets, they'll buy goods direct and yet pay perhaps a higher premium for such products. Why is that? Well, because perceived provenance of the goods they are buying is much higher when they buy direct. Removing the outdated and protectionist Common Agricultural Policy gives the UK the chance to close the gap from producer to consumer, maintaining the very highest food standards in the world and to continue to lead the world on matters of food safety. For these reasons and the fact that the Trade and Agricultural Commission has now been agreed, we see no reason to ask our Chief Executive to write another letter. It is our plan to continue to give the great support our Farms and Rural Estates team at the Cambridgeshire County Council gives to our farm tenants, and to continue to drive them and others to produce the world's leading food products. We plan to continue to support our government and now in the areas covered by the new Trade and Agricultural Commission. For these reasons, regrettably, and more, I will not be supporting this motion. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Goldsack. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Chair. There's just one slight thing that concerns me about this motion is that even with statutory powers, there is no guarantee that such a commission would support the current high standards that we have for food in this country. And therefore, it seems to me that this may be something that we need to keep an eye on, and it may well be that another motion in the future may be needed to urge such a commission to use its statutory powers to maintain our standards. And I hope that Councillor MacDonald will keep his eye on that and inform us if we need to do that, because just having commission statutory powers doesn't guarantee that they will maintain our current standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Nsinga.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm really disappointed by what I've just heard from Councillor Goldsack. I have to say, I think it's a real appalling way to treat the people of this country. This motion and the speeches so far have largely focused on farmers and farming in the context of the impact of the US trade deal, which will allow the import of many products produced to much lower animal welfare standards and lower quality standards, and which would have a serious impact on the viability of UK farming and agricultural businesses, particularly those businesses who want to maintain our current high animal welfare standards and quality standards. But it's important to remember that the impact is not just on farmers, but is actually on everyone in this country, because we all eat the food which would be imported as a consequence of any trade deal. Some MPs, including the MP for South Cambridgeshire, have already been attempting to tell us that this UK trade deal will not reduce our standards because there will be labelling in supermarkets and in other places to show where products come from. But only a fraction of our food is sold well labelled. I'm very well aware of this. I've been deliberately ordering takeaways from many of our local restaurants and other fast food places. And I'm extremely aware that I have no knowledge of where they source their ingredients from. And it does actually impact on what I order when I buy from them. The same is true of sandwiches and most other prepared food. We are not aware of the sourcing of our products when we buy things that have been manufactured by other people. Improved animal welfare standards have been a key issue for British food policy throughout my lifetime, and I find it incredibly depressing to see that long argument that the British have been having and winning in the European Union for decades about improving animal welfare standards now being so heavily undermined by the potential of a trade deal with America. It is just going in absolutely the wrong direction. During the Brexit referendum, the Leave campaign were really explicit in saying that we would not be moving to import chlorinated chicken or hormone-fed beef. But all of that is now going by the by, and the breaking of promises seems to be becoming normalised in British politics. We must not allow that to happen. The control of food standards needs to remain something which is controlled in the UK and not controlled in the US through trade negotiations. Councillor Goldsack says that the NFU's demands have been met, with which I disagree. I don't think that is correct. But this is not just about the NFU. It is about everyone in this country who cares about animal welfare and the welfare of the things that we eat. The current US trade talks would lead to UK consumers having less control and less faith in the standards of the food that we eat in this country. This is not the control which is promised, and it is not what consumers want. And I'm very grateful to Councillor McDonald for bringing this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nisslinger. Councillor Dupre.
Thank you, Chair. I hadn't intended to speak in this debate, but then Councillor Goldsack spoke. And I don't intend to speak for very long, but I would like to point out that in his speech, Councillor Goldsack began by telling us about his speculation about what would happen when the UK left the European Union. In fact, the UK left the European Union on the 31st of January this year, and that rather fundamental inaccuracy on Councillor Goldsack's part rather set the tone for the rest of his contribution to the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dupre. Councillor Bowden.
Thank you, Chairman. This motion starts off by telling us that the NFU President, Minette Batters, wrote in January to the Secretary of State at DEFRA, and in February the Secretary of State agreed to the NFU's request to establish a Trade and Agriculture Commission. However, this motion has been quite overtaken by events, Chairman. In the last 2 weeks, the Trade and Agriculture Committee has actually been set up by the Secretary of State. And it's interesting to hear what the NFU President, Minette Batters, has had to say about that. She really welcomed the composition and the scope of the Commission's work. And to take a different quote from the one which Councillor Goldsack gave, she said that this means securing trade deals that work for UK farmers and consumers, as well as our farmed animals and our environment. And we will continue to work with parliamentarians so that they have proper oversight of our trade policy. And it wasn't just the NFU England who welcomed this. Phil Stocker, the Chief Executive of the National Sheep Association, said he was extremely pleased. And in fact, there was widespread agreement across the farming industry that this was a good thing. And it's not surprising because, again, Councillor Scott, a little bit out of date in her information, the membership of the Commission has already been announced. And that membership is overwhelmingly made up of farmers and retailers. Of the 16 members, 6 are farmers or represent farming interests, 4 representing retailers. That's including the NFU England, NFU Scotland, NFU Kimberley, the Ulster Farmers Union, the Farmers Union of Wales, and there is a lamb farmer as well. So the Commission is extremely well balanced, and it's in an extremely good position to give advice. Now, it's really welcome that we'll be throwing off the dead weight of the wasteful and costly common agricultural policy, allowing us to support our farmers in our own way. And we really don't need to replace a bureaucratic common agricultural policy with our own statutory bureaucratic system. And I really do look forward to this commission not merely upholding existing standards, but particularly improving standards for the transportation and slaughter of livestock. And I'd ask that members vote against this motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bowden. Councillor Tierney, before I invite you in to speak, could I just remind you that the protocol agreed before the last council meeting, protocol agreed by leaders, was that they would restrict the number of speakers, or attempt to restrict the number of speakers to a motion to 2. We've already had 2 from the Conservative group. If you've got something new to add, obviously I'm not going to stop you speaking, but I just want to draw members' attention that I would find it very difficult then to not allow others over and above the figure of 2 to speak on future motions. So, Councillor Tierney, do you really have something extra to add to this debate?
I'm happy to withdraw, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. In that case, I will now invite Councillor MacDonald to sum up if he wishes to. Councillor MacDonald.
Yes, Chair, thank you very much, and thank you for the contributions for everyone. I think Councillor Chris Bowden is correct to say this is a fast-moving situation, and since the motion was first written, a number of things have happened, and we do address that in the motion. We say that we welcome the proposal for the establishment of the Commission. The 2 final points I wanted to make was to say we are at significant risk of creating a 2-tier food standard system. And that is why I'd laid the motion before the council so that the Commission would have not just advisory powers, but statutory powers to do that. And there are some concerns where we see our 2 local MPs who I'm sure have the interests of our agricultural community at heart in South Cambs and South East Cambs, and they voted against amendments in the agriculture bill to establish certain standards as part of that. So this does give me cause for concern. Just finally, as Councillor Whitehead mentioned, we will certainly keep an eye on this situation. It's extremely important, not just for our own farmers in Cambridgeshire, but much more widely and in terms of standards going forward for the next generation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Mrs. Rowe, can we move to, would now like to move to the vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. So I'll just wait for the voting screen to come up for you before I start. Would members in favour of the motion please click the buttons marked for and submit? Members against the motion, please click the buttons marked against and submit. Members wishing to abstain, please click the buttons marked abstain and submit. And I'm handing over to the host who will check with Councillor Wisson how she wishes to vote before we close the vote.
Thank you. Councillor Wisson, how would you like to vote?
Can I vote against, please?
Okay. That's everyone have now voted, so I'll close the poll. So that's 23 votes in favour, 34 against, and 0 abstentions. Therefore, the motion is lost.
Thank you. I now need to check with leaders. If I understand rightly, the Labour group and the Lib Dem group voted in favour of the motion and the Conservatives voted against. Could the leaders just confirm that? Councillor Nasinga?
That's correct.
That is correct.
Councillor Machine, thank you, Councillor Machine. Councillor Count?
Correct.
Councillor Sanderson, are you aware of how the independent group voted?
I voted in favour.
Can I assume that's true of Councillor Giles as well?
Yes, it can indeed, sir.
Michelle, are you content?
Yes, Chairman, that's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Moving. That concludes the discussion of the second motion. We now move to the third motion submitted by Councillor Manning. Before I ask Councillor Manning to move his motion, I understand that there is an alteration which has been circulated to all members. Can I ask for the meeting's consent, which will be signified without discussion? So unless I see a blue hand saying somebody's not happy about that, I will assume that you're happy for Councillor Manning to propose his motion with the alteration as set out on 6 of 8. Okay, Councillor Manning.
Thank you, Chair. Just before I lay out the reasons for why I've brought this motion before all of this, I just wanted to say a little bit about the tone of the debate. Obviously, racism is an extremely emotive subject, but I hope that in what I'm doing with this motion, I'm trying to bring local action on it, that we can all treat each other with respect in this debate, whatever our views on the topic. I also want to make clear that I'm very aware that the term BAME, which I've used in the motion, is not one that every person of colour identifies with. Many people have a number of pieces of heritage that make up their identity, but I simply picked it, Chair, because I felt that it would be a term that everyone would understand. So I just want to say 3 things about why I've brought this motion before the council. Some of that is personal, some of that is for the council itself and its role. And an equally important bit is for the council's staff. But starting with the personal one, Chair, it's really simple for me. I'm not affected by racism. I've never had to have a conversation with my parents where they told me that I would face prejudice throughout my life because of the colour of my skin. But I know I have friends of multiple different types of heritage who have had to have those conversations with their children. And it upsets me in a fundamental way that we are in a society where people feel they have to. Imagine having to tell your children that you can't protect them fully from prejudice in society. I'm not affected by it, as I said, but I do witness it, particularly in my division. I witness prejudice and racism against Gypsy Roma traveller groups. It almost sometimes feels like some people, minority of people, luckily, view prejudice against them, against Gypsy Roma travellers, as a sort of the last acceptable form of racism. It's not. So those are my personal reasons. For the council itself, I think that sometimes, I think we all know we deal with more than bins and potholes, Chair, but I think sometimes residents, for understandable reasons, think that perhaps we deal with the sort of business as usual type things. And I think it's important to show that we can, as a local council, respond to national moments and national changes in the mood. And I think Black Lives Matter, the death of George Floyd, is one of those moments. And it's important to show to everyone that we can take practical steps to aid in the fight against racism. And the final category that I'd like to mention is our staff. We obviously employ a large number of BME staff. We have disproportionately low representation at the higher levels of council. And I've heard just recently from a number of them about the barriers they feel they face. And I don't want them to feel that they have a cynical response to this motion, because I want to feel that the motion proposes tangible changes on both short and medium timescales to get tangible results. And for that reason, I'm very grateful for Councillor Count and the Conservative group for proposing that I remove the 2 points 2 and 6 in the motion, because I do believe, I see the point that maybe those aren't things that we can influence, and we shouldn't be promising to influence things that we have no power over. So to sum up, Chair, this is about trying to get tangible results to make people's lives better who face barriers that I'll never face in my life. And I hope the whole council can come behind this and support the motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Manning. Do you have a seconder for your motion?
I do. It's Councillor Scott.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I do second the motion and would reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Criswell.
Thank you, Chairman. The Conservative group would like to reiterate our condemnation of discrimination in all its forms and join with the sentiment of the motion that racism has no place in our society. I wish to emphasise that this council has a long-standing commitment to equality, so this is not new. However, we are not complacent. The motion refers to the Council's single equality strategy. This sets out our vision for equality and diversity, the delivery of which is overseen by the Council's diversity group, comprising officers and elected members. Support is provided by the Diversity Action Group with representatives from all service areas. There is also an informal diversity network for all staff and members to raise the profile and celebrate diversity across the organisation. A review is already underway to identify and respond to any systemic racism in our organisation. This includes wider involvement in policy development to identify and remove real or perceived barriers to equal opportunities, developing e-learning to include a cultural competency training programme, a review of recruitment practices to allow an increase in diversity. The redaction of applicants' names is already undertaken and will continue. Promoting the Council's respect at work policy, which helps avoid behaviour and language that can transmit hostile or negative messages, whether intended or not. Reporting of the gender pay gap to the Staffing and Appeals Committee. And finally, reviewing the recruitment of the LGA Leadership and Management Graduate Scheme to attract a more diverse pool of candidates. The Communities and Partnerships Committee is well placed to monitor and react to external issues and influence policy and engagement. Examples are a review of hate crime reporting arrangements, working alongside police colleagues to ensure a coordinated system is in place to seek justice and support victims. A restructured adult skills service has transformed to focus on those furthest from employment, including those who want to upskill to improve their life chances. Ethnic minorities who may find it hard to engage are particularly important in this work. The Social Mobility Working Group has been working for some time to tackle multiple deprivation and improve life chances. We want to assist all those who are disadvantaged for whatever reason, but this work has given us opportunity to particularly concentrate on the needs of Black, Asian and minority ethnic residents. The group met yesterday and the latest report will be tabled at the next committee meeting on the 6th of August. The People and Communities Directorate has worked closely with public health colleagues to identify groups more vulnerable to the risks of COVID-19. This builds on the existing work to ensure the needs of protected characteristic groups are reflected in service planning. A full risk matrix has been developed, including mitigation measures to increase protection and long-term goals to work with vulnerable groups. This is particularly important at this time with COVID-19 still present in our communities. The coordinated response is overseen by the partners of the Local Resilience Forum. We should all treat our residents and communities fairly and with respect, Mr. Chairman, and of course that includes those from all cultures, religions and ethnicities. We will be supporting this motion.
Thank you to Councillor Criswell. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to report to the Council our experience in South Cambridgeshire and how positive and inspiring it was to have cross-party support, well meant, very seriously taken. And from what I've heard from Councillor Criswell so far, leads me to believe that a similar kind of positive and inspirational approach can be made here. So I'd just like to offer my full support to Councillor Manning in the motion.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Councillor Jones.
Thank you. Thank you. And Councillor Criswell has given the long response about what the county is doing. I wanted to make a couple of comments, one from the perspective of the Health Committee, because I know that Public Health team has been working extraordinarily hard to ensure that that disadvantaged and marginalised groups are contacted and supported. And I can see the work through the pandemic has been very, very strong in that area. But I wanted also to make a personal comment, following on from Councillor Manning, really. I was contacted a while ago by a very young teacher who asked me what I could do about the issue of racism in the school curriculum. I was a bit surprised by this because I hadn't been a school teacher for an awfully long time. But it reminded me that I had experienced racism, partly because I was in a relationship in the 1970s with a young black guy, but also because I was working in London at that time as a very, very young teacher. And we had a wonderful project called the Schools Council Project. And the Schools Council Project introduced multi-cultural students to a range of Akbar's empire in India and Swahili culture and Swahili building and the Zulu state and so on, things that people didn't know existed. And I reflected on this because it seemed to me that a lot of that, looking back now at more recent history, has simply disappeared. Huge amount of work went into it. And I think actually what we need, which is why I'm supporting the motion among other things, what we need is another push on that to say that history is very varied, very divergent, and needs to draw in all groups within our very diverse society.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Machini.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I just want to echo what everybody has said before me, and I would like to congratulate Councillor Manning for an extremely comprehensive and very well worded motion. I am behind every single word of it. It's excellent. And I would like also to echo what Councillor MacDonald has said. We have seen a number of these motions pop up in various district and city councils recently. Some of those experiences have been really quite emotional and quite, slightly different perhaps to watch to what we usually consider to be your normal business of dealing with what we normally deal with in the council. Some of that can be helped, but it makes such a nice change and it reminds us of why we really are here. I would like to pay tribute to my friend and colleague, Councillor Bejo Titala, for presenting the motion in Cambridge City Council last week and for a very powerful speech, which I encourage everyone to look up if they would like to hear. And the final point I really want to make is in conjunction to what Councillor Criswell said. We were in that meeting earlier this week and we discussed what we can do as a council using our committees and strategy groups to improve as many aspects of this. This is an incredibly complex issue, and to improve every aspect of this that we can. And I would like for us to really look at what the diversity strategy group can do to improve representation amongst our own numbers, because those voices, as have been proved in various districts and cities this week, those voices are so valuable, and we should do all we can to make sure that we encourage them to be able to be among us. And thank you again.
Thank you, Councillor Machini. Councillor Harrison.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I also just want to echo what others have said, really, to support the motion, to support Councillor Criswell's very serious statement about the Council's position, setting out what the Council is trying to do. But also, I just want really to say something about myself and to reach out to the rest of you in doing that, because at the outset of the sort of current Black Lives Matter movement, I realised that I am racist, that I am part of a society that is absolutely racist. And I made a decision that I want to try to learn to be anti-racist. It's not good enough to be not racist because that is in a sense still allowing racism through. And so my challenge to myself is to try to learn to be anti-racist. And to be an ally. This is a word that I often hear Black people using, to be an ally to the Black Lives Matter movement. And that requires me to look very, very carefully at everything that I do and say, and to make active efforts to try to learn what it means to do this. Now, I just wanted to say, if there's anybody else in the 60, whatever we are, 61 of us, who feels like me that this is a time for real personal change, as well as institutional change, but that we've got to grasp this now. If there is anyone else who feels like that, who would like to get in contact with me, just bung me an email. Maybe we can form a little group. Maybe there's something that we can do that will make a difference to ourselves, and in doing so, make a difference to the world, a small difference to the world. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Harrison. Councillor Scott, you reserved your right to speak. You wish to come in now?
If I may, yes. Thank you, Chair. First, I'd like to start on a positive note. The motion does refer to the Black History Month and the work of Cambridgeshire Libraries, and ask that more work be done in that area. And I would like to commend the libraries for the work they already do, and I've got no doubt that they will follow up Councillor Manning's motion, this motion, by increasing the exposure they give during Black History Month to the wonderful history and the important history and the terrible history that relates to the position of Black and BAME people generally within this country and indeed within the world. In 2010, after the austerity budget, as it was called, and there were what were described as riots in London, I did research in the area of Tottenham, and that did confirm undoubtedly that the treatment of Black and BAME citizens and community in this country does remain dramatically poor. They are more likely to be stopped and searched by police, to be arrested and to be put through the criminal justice system, to face racist abuse or be confronted with all of these. The Black and BAME citizens, as has already been acknowledged, are far more likely to be victims of COVID-19. And this goes to race and ethnicity, and it goes to economic status, it goes to housing, it goes to all the issues that are associated with discrimination in terms of the Black and BAME generally community. They're discriminated against in the workplace as well, in terms of employment, whether it's appointment or promotion or wages and salaries. And all these issues need to be taken into account. One of the recommendations is that we ask the Combined Authority to produce a toolkit for businesses. I should give a promotion here to the Anti-Discrimination Act of 1998 of one of the Australian states, Tasmania, where I was Anti-Discrimination Commissioner. And that act puts a pro-onus on all business employers and so on to take active steps in terms of eliminating all forms of discrimination, including racism, before any claims or complaints of racism arise. I'd just like to conclude by saying this, that it is vital for Cambridgeshire County Council to support measures that recognise discrimination and take concrete steps to end it. Because unless we accept the past as a factor in how the present exists and how the present is experienced by Black and BAME members generally of this community, we cannot change the future. We have to recognise the past to see it as absolutely crucial to the present and as crucial to our work to make a better and braver and brighter future. Social, economic and historical justice is essential for everybody in our society in Cambridgeshire and across the United Kingdom. Only after ending discrimination can we bring about the necessary change. The Black and BAME community generally must be able to feel and crucially be in complete equality with every single one of us, no matter our creed, our class, our colour or country of origin. This means that institutions like the County Council must do all it can and encourage all government and non-government associations or organisations to do the same. Finally, in the end, racism and intolerance of those of a different colour should be as socially unacceptable as violence in all its forms. An onus lies on government to tackle and reform the police and the criminal justice system to ensure that no part of the United Kingdom allows such intolerance, discrimination, injustice and abuse to persist. Only then can we actually begin the arduous task of creating equality throughout our society. I thank Councillor Manning for putting forward this motion, and I thank him for asking me to second it, and we support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Manning, do you wish to sum up?
Yeah, I'll just say a few words briefly, Chair. I think it's important to something like this. I was a local Facebook group. Someone, when I mentioned that I was trying to coordinate these motions to different councils, accused me of jumping on a bandwagon. Frankly, I think we're all jumping on a bandwagon here, and I think we should all be quite proud to jump on the bandwagon of and as Councillor Harris has said, anti-racism and being actively anti-racist. I was very inspired by Councillor Harrison's words. She's someone I've always looked up on the council since I first joined it, and to hear her that she'd come through that realization, I think was incredibly powerful. And I just wanted to say that in a way I came to a party like myself because I'm appalled to say that I had no idea who Colston was before that business with the statue. And I've made extra effort now. I think I always have, but I've made extra effort to listen to the stories of my friends who are people of colour and their experiences. And I'd like to thank Councillor Criswell, Councillor Jones for their contributions. I found them very moving, particularly for the seriousness with which Councillor Criswell, on behalf of the majority group, addressed the motion. But I think I'd like to, just on a final point, I'd like to echo what Councillor Machini said, because I think we've now had versions of this motion go to multiple councils, represented with representation from Conservative, Labour and Liberal Democrat groups in various balances, and they have passed those councils. It is very nice to feel that we can find things in some cases where we all join together and agree and put forward tangible change on issues that may not affect all of us directly, but certainly do affect a number of our constituents. And I really hope that constituents of our people of colour do see and hear this, and most importantly, over the next 6 months to a year and onwards, we all follow this up and we all make sure these changes actually happen and people's lives are actually made better. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Manning. We should now move to the vote. However, there does seem to be general consensus in support of the motion. So, but if anybody disagrees with that, could they please use the raised hand function now? No, there's no indication. So therefore I see no objection. So we will take the motion as carried. Thank you, Councillor Manning. Right. That concludes the discussion of the third motion. We can now move to the fourth motion, which is submitted by Councillor Machini. And I ask Councillor Machini to move and speak to her motion as set out on pages 8 to 9 of the council agenda. Councillor Machini.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the opportunity to put this motion. I would first of all like to start by crediting those colleagues on whose work this motion is built. First of all, my colleague Sandra Crawford, who I believe is kindly agreeing to second this. She put a very pertinent written question to the last council, and upon which answer most of this is based. I would also like to credit Councillor Nikki Massey, who's a councillor on Cambridge City Council, and she's also a trustee of the Cambridge University Hospitals NHS Foundation Trust, whose original idea and draft this was. And I would also like to thank Wendy Ogle-Welburn for working with me on the final wording and for checking my numbers. I would also very much like to start by saying what this motion is not. This motion is not an attack on either this local authority or local authorities in general. Local authorities have been unable, despite their best efforts, to stem the tide of infection of this virus, when they've been starved of funds themselves for the best part of the last 10 years, and also when they have been under the latest incarnation of this government, whose approach has been rather centralized compared to the past. In 1979, 2/3 of adult social care was state or council run. Nowadays, 84% of it is private. It is also, this motion, absolutely not a criticism of a brilliant, heroic frontline staff who have worked tirelessly in the most challenging circumstances to care for their vulnerable charges. This motion is an impulse for this local authority to lead. We are heading into very uncertain times, and due to the nature of this virus, which is more deadly for the elderly and vulnerable, care homes will be once again on the front line if and when there is a second spike, or God save us, another pandemic. We need to learn our lessons, we need to learn them properly, we need to learn them fast. We need to build on the invaluable work that I know our staff and officers are doing. to document what happened. But we do need to ensure we estimate this work independently to encourage full transparency and to guard us against charges of whitewashing. We need to not wait for the government's independent inquiry, which has now been promised, but there is no agreed timeline and no established terms. The government is at this present time more concerned about potential misreporting of ONS death figures, into which an urgent inquiry has been ordered, than it is about preventing and repeating the mistakes that have led collectively to 25,000 care home deaths during this pandemic. We need to lead, and we need to be seen as a trailblazer of best practice when the lives of our most vulnerable are at stake. And I would like to implore this administration not to put itself into the position of being accused of not acting when they had the opportunity to do so. And I heartily commend this motion to Council.
Thank you, Councillor Machini. Do you have a seconder for your motion?
Do you wish me to speak at this point?
That's up to you, Councillor Crawford. Could you just say you're seconding the motion?
Yes, I am seconding the motion, and I
It's
reserve
up to you
my
whether you
right to
speak.
speak.
You're reserving your right to speak, okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Van de Ven.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Councillor Machini for bringing this fundamentally important motion to the Council today, which the Liberal Democrat group will be supporting. And also thank you for your excellent presentation of the motion. As local members, I know that we've all been keeping in contact with our local care homes, and we'll all be familiar with the same sense of absolute dedication to the task, but coupled with utter helplessness in anticipation of a highly likely outbreak due to all the things happening according to government requirements, but against common sense. Against this backdrop, I've heard particular praise for the Council's extra efforts to provide on-site testing before it was more widely available. It's good to know that the General Purposes Committee is committed to learning as part of the Council's COVID recovery plan. However, the proposal today, as the proposer has made very clear, is calling for an independent report, which necessarily goes far beyond the Council, as it's about the much bigger picture. So it seems to me that we have a duty to support the broadest possible learning from this extraordinary and unprecedented time in which more than half of care homes reported an outbreak of COVID-19 in an ongoing pandemic that is dominated by unknowns. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Van de Ven. I'm not seeing any other. Oh, yes, I am now. Oh, they're coming up. Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, every single death from COVID-19 is a total tragedy, and every single death matters. And I feel for everyone that has been affected by the death of a loved one from this terrible disease, as well as for those that are still struggling to recover from it. This is a well-intentioned motion, but I fear if we pass it, we're going to expend an awful lot of time and energy and learn very little new that will lead to any change in practice that hasn't already been made. Councillor Machini is absolutely right to interrogate this subject. On the face of it, the care home statistics in Cambridgeshire do warrant further investigation. Cambridgeshire as a whole has fared well, relatively speaking, in terms of rates of infection. The latest report from our public health team shows the rate of infection as determined by Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 testing is at 336.6 per 100,000 people in Cambridgeshire. That compares with 377 in the east of England and 439 in England. But the same report gives Care Quality Commission data for outbreaks in care homes, where Cambridgeshire is shown to have recorded outbreaks in 52.7% of its care homes compared with 47% in the east of England. So looking at the breakdown of the number of care home outbreaks week by week, it is clear that the number of outbreaks peaked between the 13th of April and the 11th of May. And importantly, 15th of April was when testing of all symptomatic residents in care homes began. During that period, the number of outbreaks in Cambridgeshire was slightly higher than the national average, but it was lower during all other weeks. It's important to state from the outset that Cambridgeshire County Council has defined an outbreak as being just a single case of infection in a care home and has taken action on that basis. And it's also important to note that the data does have severe limitations. So, for example, The recording of a care home as having an outbreak includes those with suspected outbreaks. So some of the care homes that made it and been counted on the list will have turned out not to, in fact, have had an outbreak at all. There's a further issue in that whilst the counting of outbreaks is limited to care homes, the percentage is derived from all care settings, including, for example, supported living and sheltered housing. So in areas with higher levels of other care settings, the percentage of outbreaks in care homes may be falsely low. So taken to an extreme, if you had one care home and 99 other settings, and that care home had an outbreak, the percentage would show as 1%, whereas really it would be 100% of care homes. Those areas that have been very conscientious at testing, and Cambridgeshire is one of those, may also appear to have had higher levels of outbreaks simply by virtue of doing the right thing for doing more testing. Another important indicator is the somewhat unpalatable term excess deaths. And on this indicator, our local public health team reports that on excess deaths, the trend in Cambridgeshire is broadly similar to that seen nationally. So I'm afraid I do take issue with the fourth bullet point of the motion that states that Cambridge has suffered a large number of excess deaths. That's simply not what we're told by our public health team. There's also a very sad truth about excess deaths in care homes. Our residents in care homes are some of the very most vulnerable people in our communities, and they're living often with multiple and complex conditions and often nearing the end of their lives. And under these circumstances, changes, even very small changes, can lead a person to sadly dying. And the very fact that loved ones are no longer able to visit, for example, can have an incredibly severe impact on a person, leading to them simply giving up. What actually matters is, did we do everything we could at a local level with the information we had available at the time to protect people? And I truly believe that in Cambridgeshire we did. Hindsight's a beautiful thing. At the time people were being discharged from hospital, it was totally unknown that people could be carrying the disease asymptomatically. Testing wasn't yet widely available. Asymptomatic testing didn't begin until the 3rd of July. And from the 15th of April, all residents were tested prior to being admitted to a care home. This council's been very widely praised for its proactive and supportive work with providers during this pandemic, and it's been gratifying to receive thank you letters from care homes and CQC compliments. Specifically on PPE, until the LRF took over, this council made emergency supplies of PPE available to all care homes. And together with the CCG, we also provided extensive further support for infection control, training, and we put in place supporting staff in care homes. And we've long had a care home standard operating procedure. So the County Council, through its commissioning and public health teams, together with its partners in the NHS, Public Health England, we've followed the guidance to the letter, and we've adapted process and practices throughout the pandemic as soon as new information came to light. It's gone way beyond many other local authorities in terms of support to care homes, and with the best will in the world, attempting to determine how the infection, which can be borne asymptomatically, entered into every care home that reported an outbreak is an impossible task. And even if it were possible, it wouldn't change the practice that we have in place now. Our staff need to be focused on their day-to-day work, supporting care homes, and on the incredibly important work for the future, recovery and new models of social care. So for those reasons, I will be voting against this motion today, but I do recognise that it came absolutely from the heart, from the right place and with the right motivations.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I must admit, I got thoroughly confused by some of Councillor Bailey's statistics, and she seemed almost like Donald Trump saying, well, the more you test, the more you find, and therefore you're completely out of this world in the terms of what the situation is. I would just point you to the most recent highlight report from Adults and Safeguarding, which says recovery planning work is underway to ensure we learn from and embed some of the good practice that we developed during the pandemic. And I think it is absolutely essential that we learn from what has gone on in care homes. As Councillor Meschini has said.
Sorry, Chairman, can I raise a point of personal explanation? I'm sorry to butt in, but I'm waving.
Sorry, Councillor Bailey, but you recall right at the beginning of the meeting, I said that one of the things we cannot do on the virtual meetings, there cannot be points of personal explanation.
I do apologise. Sorry, Chairman. Sorry, Councillor Wilson.
Councillor Wilson, continue, please.
As I was saying, Councillor Meschini at the beginning recognised the wonderful response that County Council staff, NHS and provider staff have put in during the current pandemic in care homes. but locally, whatever numbers you look at, we have had many deaths, whether you call them excess deaths or not, but we've had many deaths in care homes from COVID-19. We've had issues about the capacity of care homes to cope, and we've had issues about the lack of and cost of PPE for staff. Now, we all know that it is good practice after any major incident to review what happened and to learn and ensure that we are best placed for the next emergency. And what this motion is seeking to do is to ensure that we do it soon, whilst the things are still in people's minds, whilst there is a bit of a lull before what could be a second wave hitting us in the winter. And you recently, following intervention from a question from Ed Davey, leader of the Liberal Democrats, Boris Johnson said that a national public inquiry will be held. Well, what we're saying here is it makes sense to do a local inquiry into what happened in care homes whilst we have that opportunity to do so. So therefore, I will be supporting the motion. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Jones.
Thank you. Well, I was extremely disappointed by Councillor Bailey's response because having gone through a lot of statistics, she then said that she truly believes that everything that could have been done has been done. Well, yes. And if you think that, if you feel that Cambridgeshire County Council has been a leader, then surely what needs to happen is that Cambridgeshire County Council needs to lead. And that is what this motion is about. This motion is saying, what learning can we do? What learning can we do, which will in fact enhance the reputation of Cambridgeshire County Council for openness and for ability to move forward. It doesn't have to be long-winded. It can be quite speedy, but it is about not being defensive. And what I heard from Councillor Bailey was a lot of defensiveness, which disappoints me enormously, because actually my experience, both on the Health Committee and in a series of meetings with local hospital trusts and the CCG and so on, is a willingness to learn. In fact, we were told only last week by CUH that they really want to learn, that they have concerns, that they want to move forward and learn as far as they can from what has happened in the past. We've already had an admission that there were discharges into care homes, which under ideal circumstances would not have taken place. So there is learning that can happen. The CCG itself has addressed the Health Committee in terms of the learning that it is trying to do, and so have other trusts in local meetings. So it seems to me that we've got a climate in which our health system and our care system wants to learn, but the county council is not prepared to lead that process. And I find that extraordinarily, not only disappointing, but also rather perplexing.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Harford.
Thank you, Chairman. Like Councillor Jones, I'm a member of the Health Committee, and I endorse what she said about the meeting that a small group of us had with CUH last week. That sentiment of wanting to learn was also very evident when I was part of the small group that also met with the North West Anglia Trust, who are of course responsible for Hinchinbrook and Peterborough hospitals. I think that we're all committed to learning, and I have to say that I want the council to do any further research into how it learns from what happened that it possibly can do, but I don't believe that this is the right time. From speaking to both those trusts that I've mentioned, I understand, I think, where the problem arose, and I don't think that it was necessarily one that arose locally. I think everybody was in a place where they were responding to national guidelines, and I'm not sure that those national guidelines were helpful at the time. My concern is now to see those teams that are working incredibly hard to recover from the situation that they're left in. So the social care team and also the NHS, let's face it, they have to maintain a state of preparedness, and at the same time the NHS is desperately now trying to find the ability and capacity to be able to address some of those waiting lists that have lengthened during the pandemic. And it's for that reason that I feel that I can't support this motion. It's not that I don't think that we all have a lot to learn from our experience, but it's about the timing of it. And I do think that it's quite necessary in us looking at the lessons we want to learn, that we hear from national government first, because I think that there will be some lessons that we need to learn about how we respond to instruction in the future. And so I really, Councillor Meschini, I really do regret that I'm not able to support your motion as it stands, but it is simply because I do feel there are greater things at play here, which we need to hear before we proceed with any major learning exercise. I do want to reassure members here today that from talking to those two trusts, what I'm absolutely convinced of is that the things that most probably led to that awful situation have now been addressed, that there are safeguards in place, and that part of their readiness for anything else that may come down the line is such that those mistakes would not happen again. And additionally, we have the care home plan, which I'm quite convinced that with the two things in place, that at this moment it isn't the right opportunity for us to proceed, and thus I won't be supporting your motion, Councillor Meschini, despite the fact that, like Councillor Bailey, I do know that the questions that you're asking will need to be answered, but I do think that initially those need to come from central government. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harford. Councillor Bradnam, before I bring you in, I'm at a loss because I can't remember just how many people outside of the proposer and seconder, of the seconder is from your group, who have actually spoken. But if you're a third speaker rather than a first or second, can you just remind me? Otherwise, could I ask you not to speak at this stage, having earlier asked Councillor Tierney, who did withdraw? Brad,
I'm struggling to remember. I think Councillor
I know Councillor Wilson has spoken.
And Councillor van der Ven spoke early on, I believe.
So in that case, you would be the third speaker. So
in which case, I'll withdraw.
Thank you. So that's very helpful. I appreciate that. Councillor Crawford, as the seconder, do you wish to, you did reserve your right to speak. Do you wish to speak now?
Yes, I think thank you very much, Chair. In seconding this motion, I have in mind the risk of a second wave, which the chief advisors to the government have made us all aware of. I remind myself of the words, "the beauty of hindsight" from Councillor Bailey, and the words from the last speaker about the timing of this motion. And I think with a second wave predicted in September, the timing couldn't be more perfect for us to reflect on what happened before and learned from it. The final sentence of this motion, that lessons have been learned, are particularly relevant when planning for the possibility of a second wave. Obviously, the movement of patients from hospital who have not been tested for coronavirus must be controlled, because that was a huge factor nationally. And it was considered a national scandal that this was the cause of many excess deaths in care homes. There was also the problem of PPE equipment, which I'm absolutely certain was provided by local officers and staff, but it came a little late and some of it was inadequate. This was reported in city care homes. With hindsight, we can learn from this and make sure that it's available right from the beginning. But I do have concerns about this, because we have reported, which everybody is aware of, concerns reported in the local press only last week, that contracts of 830 million were given to 12 companies who have hitherto not delivered. And test and trace contracts in the June news awarded to companies who've been fined for non-delivery in the past. This is a concern. So I think, although the local Cambridgeshire Authority has been pristine, tried to do their best, there are these national issues that we do probably need to discuss with the government to make sure that we can perform well if we did have a second wave. And that is my main concern, and I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. Colleagues, I don't get the sense of a general consensus on this motion, so therefore I'm going to ask Mr. Rowe now to conduct a vote on this, please.
Chairman, I think the mover of the motion has the right to come back.
Oh, you do. Thank you. You reminded me. Gosh, I can easy to forget. Yes, thank you. Councillor Machini, my apologies.
Sorry, thank you, Chairman. No worries. I'm unsure myself. I'm not actually sure I would have asked for that right if you hadn't given it, because I forgot I had it. But anyway, just a very brief summing up, and I'm grateful for the people that have spoken in favour. First of all, no, nothing about Cambridgeshire in particular was remarkable in terms of us either be particularly good or particularly bad, particularly fortunate or particularly unfortunate. We want to do this because we want to lead, and we want to actually show, we actually want to be the first to actually start on this path. In terms of waiting for the government, and I do appreciate, I do know what it looks like, and I don't know quite how many people will believe me if I say this, but I promise you, should Labour be in government right now, I'd be here saying exactly the same thing, because whether or not you support or agree with who is in government right now, I mean, they have timings and they have particular situations which do not necessarily agree with what you want to do locally. And sitting here waiting for government to act, however well-intentioned, however reliable the government is not something that I suppose you can probably do. In particular, this government who has shown a little bit of a problem with the priorities, but this is second to the main point, which, you know, local authorities shouldn't sit waiting for government, whoever's in government. And finally, a point on what Councillor Bailey said. I mean, I do appreciate, and in fact, it surprised me that she would say what she said and conclude what she concluded, because I do appreciate and I do agree that the numbers don't tell a clear-cut story. It's not particularly obvious to see what has been done and what the problem is, but that should be a reason to do exactly what my motion said. Not a reason to say, oh, you know, like we're going to be spending resources on learning what we already know. I don't know quite how you know what we already know. I'm not entirely sure we know everything we need to know. And that's part of the point of the motion, which I hope was noted. I kept reasonably short. And the reason I kept it reasonably short is that I really, really didn't want to say anything at all about how this inquiry should be conducted, on what terms, who should design it, etc., because God save you. I mean, if you want to do something like this, it's not me you want to ask how this is going to be done. But, you know, we need to get the professionals, the extremely fantastic people that we employ at all levels, to tell us and to tell in the context of something that cannot be challenged just as being a whitewash, or, you know, I was worried about telling my manager what I really thought, those sort of things. We need to get that advice, and we need to get it now, because quite frankly, you know, Parliament is in recess as of tomorrow. I really wouldn't wait. And that is everything. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Machini. So, as I said, we'll now have to move to the vote. to the vote. Thank you, Mrs. Rowe.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just wait till the vote comes up on the screen for you. Would members in favour of the motion please click the buttons marked for and submit? Members against the motion, please click the buttons marked against and submit. Members wishing to abstain, please click the buttons marked abstain and submit. I'll be handing over to the host, who will ask Councillor Wisson how she wishes to vote before the vote is closed.
Thank you. Councillor Wisson, how do you wish to vote?
I wish to vote against this motion.
Thank you. So that's everyone has voted. So I'm going to close the poll. And the results are 23 for, 33 against. Therefore, the motion is lost. Oh, with no abstentions, sorry.
Thank you. I now need to confirm that the Liberal Democrat group and the Labour group voted for the motion and that the Conservative group voted against. And I'll come to the independents in a moment. Councillor Machini, could you just confirm that?
I very much hope that is correct insofar as my group is concerned.
Councillor Nsinga?
That's my understanding. Thank you.
Councillor Count?
That's correct. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Sanderson, do you wish to say how the independent group voted?
I voted in favour of the motion, Mr. Chairman.
And indeed,
so did I, Chairman.
Okay. Mrs. Rowe, you're content with that?
Yes, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, that concludes the discussion on 3 of the motions. I'm now moving to item 9 on the agenda, which is questions. But before I do that, I just want to say that when I've done this bit and we've done the withdrawal of the members of the planning group committee from the, I'm proposing to take a very short break. I think we've got enough time left today that we don't need to have a lunch break, but I do recognise that some people might want to take at least a comfort break. So at that point, before we actually then go into the debate on the final motion, I will take a 10-minute break. Okay, so item 9, written questions. A response to 3 written questions received has been provided to the political groups before the meeting and published on the council's website. So we're now moving to back to the first motion. Get my screen working here. So before asking Councillor Tierney to move and speak to his motion as set out on pages 3 and 5 of the council agenda, I will need to ask the host to remove from the meeting all members of the planning committee and substitutes in order to avoid predetermination if the project is downsized or another EFW proposal comes forward. The following councillors will need to leave: planning committee members Ashwood, Connor, Gardner, Harford, Hunt, Hindersley, Scott and Smith, and the substitute members Batchelors, Bradnam, Crawford, Fuller, Gowing, Howell, Hudson, Jenkins, Kavanagh. And to remind you that Councillor Tim Wotherspoon, the Vice Chairman of the Environment and Sustainability Committee, has also decided to leave the meeting for this. So if we can now make sure that that has now happened. And at this point, I'm going to suggest we, for permission, well, with or without your permission, really, because we're going to have a 10-minute break, which means I suggest we get back here at 20 to 1. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll be all right. I couldn't help but that's why I planned
Thank you all. Should now be able to reconvene the meeting. Can I just get confirmation, Mrs. Rowe, that those who should not be at this part of the meeting have now left?
Yes, Chairman, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tierney, would you like to move and speak to your motion, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I would like to. You have all had the motion, which I hope is clear and concise. I hope and believe that this is an issue that we can stand together on. One of the things I have noticed in my research on these kinds of incinerators is that in the opposition campaigns, they unite people who are otherwise quite diverse in their outlooks. They unite left and right. They unite the most green environmentalists with those that traditionally raise an eyebrow at the same. Those people may oppose the incinerator for quite different reasons, but those reasons are no less valid for that. In Wisbech, to the best of my knowledge, all political parties and independents are united in opposition to the incinerator. And for those of you that know Wisbech, you should realise how unusual that situation is. This is because people of all persuasions can plainly see that an incinerator like this is not the solution we seek. If anything, it is a dangerous distraction from our search for solutions that are environmentally sound and sustainable. I'm opposed to an incinerator in Wisbech for many reasons, which are spelt out in this motion. But the first and foremost reason why I am opposed to it is that the people of Wisbech have told me very clearly that they don't want it, and I am one of their representatives. If the threat of a mega incinerator were to appear anywhere in this county, I suspect any one of you might be putting in a motion just like this to the council, and in that instance you would have my support. I hope we can show that we are united, not just for my home, but for all of our homes, because these companies do not rest on their laurels. They may simply move on and try the next place they think that they can build one of these monstrosities. A unanimous no from this council will be a powerful message that would serve us well now and in the future. So please let's stand together and support this motion. And can I please ask, Chairman, that this is a recorded vote? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. To have a recorded vote, I need to have 14 members confirming that. So if 14 members could at least show their hands. Glad we're getting there. I'm trying desperately hard to count these. Mrs. Rowe, are you able to help me on here?
Chairman, you've got 14.
We have 14 votes. We have a recorded vote. Thank you. Councillor Tierney, do you have a seconder for your motion?
Yes, I believe Councillor Hoy is going to second the motion.
Councillor Hoy.
Yeah, I second the motion and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. Right. Hopefully everybody's removed their hands from the other thing. Oh, I'm seeing no hands raised. Oh, yes. Before I'll bring you back in, Councillor Hoy. Seeing no hands raised. Oh, now I have Councillor Nasinga.
Thank you very much. I was expecting to have some other people in the debate, but there we are. We have some reservations about this motion, not really about the content of the motion, but about whether it's appropriate for a motion which is so closely related to a live planning application to be voted on at council. We absolutely accept that the present planning application will be determined by the inspectorate and not by this council, but we still have some concerns that there could be circumstances where a smaller version of this application could come before the council. The withdrawal of the members and substitutes of the planning committee from the meeting would help in such circumstances, but there are some members of our group who remain worried that the council must not be seen to be acting politically in a planning matter. So for that reason, I want to be very clear that our support for this motion relates to the particular circumstances at Wisbech at the current time. Following research into the waste situation in the Wisbech area, we don't believe that there is justification for a large incinerator in the Wisbech area. There is already capacity for incineration in Peterborough at the Peterborough incinerator, and the needs of the environment would be better served by increasing the recycling capacity in the whole area and using already existing incinerator capacity for the waste which cannot be recycled. Having expressed our concerns about the motion being so closely connected to a planning application, we are also very aware that incineration is not the best way to manage waste at a time of a global emergency. And we also regret that the wording in this motion, where it talks about those who are concerned about climate change. I thought we had decided at this council that we were all concerned about climate change. I remember that Councillor Tierney did not vote in that climate emergency motion. And I'm disappointed that he's again using some slightly weaselly words in order to get round using these climate arguments in this particular debate. But we do believe that there is a climate emergency, and we think that that means that every decision that we should be making in this council needs to be made with that climate emergency in mind. So having made all of those points, we will be supporting this motion at the end of the day. Thank you.
Sorry, I muted myself there because there was feedback. Councillor King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just wanted to say that I'm very grateful to Councillor Tierney for putting forward this motion. The proposed location of the incinerator is in his division, and entirely appropriate that he should be doing this. And I would also like to support what he says about there being widespread concern in Wisbech. There is huge concern about the health impacts of this incinerator in the local area. And I also note what Councillor Nestlinger said about there being sufficient capacity already. So I just don't see that there is justification for siting this very large incinerator so close to a population centre. I think it's unnecessary and certainly not wanted. So very happy to support this motion. Thank you, Councillor Tierney, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Hoy, you reserved your right to speak. Nobody else is showing, so you can come in now if you wish.
Yeah, I mean, I won't say too much because I think that everyone surely could be in agreement with this motion. I can't see how anyone could be against it. I mean, we must make our feelings very clear on this. We don't want this monolith in our town. Our town already suffers from deprivation as it is, and I don't think we want to be a physical dumping ground for other counties and actually possibly other countries' waste. I don't think the science on air quality and its impact on this is actually very clear, as well as, like it's already been mentioned, the impact on climate change. I mean, we already know that there's going to be over 300 lorry movements per day. That just cannot be a good thing, that, you know, that part of it alone. And furthermore, this is not just a normal incinerator, but a mega incinerator, which will be bigger than Ely Cathedral. Now, there is no way that this will not be a blot on the fen landscape at that size. I'm also very disappointed with what I believe to be very underhand tactics, in my opinion, by the proposed company for the incinerator. I don't feel they've perhaps acted openly and transparently along the way, and I do hope that changes. And on a personal level, my biggest fear is the project puts Wisbech Rail at severe threat, with the proposed incinerator going in an almost identical location to the station location, which was identified in the GRIP 3 study. We're closer than we've ever been to getting a railway back in our town, and we must not let anything jeopardise this. As Councillor Tierney has already said, so many residents in Wisbech are against this proposal, and I haven't seen an issue with such a groundswell of opposition before, so we must ensure that we're representing residents and their views. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hoy. Members, before I move on, I just want to say it's been convention in this council, both ordinary meetings and virtual meetings, that we allow the seconder to come in last so that they can pick up any points. They reserve the right. So it's very disappointing to see that after I invited Councillor Hoy to speak, there were no hands shown at that time. But Councillor Dupre, you've decided to click in at the last minute. I'm going to allow it, but could I ask you to stick to convention in future, please? Thank you. Councillor Dupre.
Chairman, there was certainly no intention at all of seeking to undercut Councillor Hoy. I raised my hand just while you were beginning to call Councillor Hoy, and I had not realised that you were calling her to speak and exercise her reserved right. It certainly was in no way my intention to undermine Councillor Hoy or the processes of this council. I think I got to the button a megasecond too late. Just therefore, very briefly, to agree with Councillor Nestlinger that it is somewhat unfortunate that this motion puts some members, particularly those members of the Environment and Sustainability Committee, in a somewhat difficult position. I'm not, like the chair or vice chair, someone who will be consulted by officers using their delegated powers in this matter, but I still feel that the timing of this motion somewhat compromises a number of members greater than those who are on the planning committee or substitutes on the planning committee. I think the motion, however, I have taken advice and been told that I can speak. The motion makes some strong and convincing arguments about the desirability and the suitability of incinerators in general, and particularly this one. Like Councillor Nethsinger, I was somewhat surprised at the wording of the statement about climate change, that it only contributes to climate change if you believe in it. Either climate change is real, in which case it's going to contribute to it whether you believe in it or not, or climate change is not real, in which case it isn't an argument to be adduced with regard to this particular incinerator. But be that as it may, there is enough in this motion that I agree with to be able to support it, which I intend to do.
Councillor Tierney, do you wish to sum up?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. First of all, I did hope that we'd get broad support for the motion, and it sounds like we have. So I'd like to thank everybody for that, especially if they vote accordingly. A couple of people raised what was called weaselly words made by me. I can assure you there was no intention to be weaselly, and I apologise if it seemed that way. I simply understand that when we speak in these meetings, we're not just speaking to this council chamber, but to the whole of the county. And the people in the county do not all share the same views. They have various nuances of views and opinions, both on climate change, global warming, and literally every other matter. And so my intention was to speak as broadly as possible so as not to alienate anyone and to build a broad consensus. And that was all. I very much hope everyone votes for this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. So although we appear to have general consensus and support the motion, we have been asked to have a recorded vote, and therefore I do, as I understand it, I have to now read the list of names because the other voting system, if I'm right, does not record.
Chairman, if it helps, I have if you would like me to read the names, I have a revised list removing everybody that's not here, so it will be a bit quicker.
Are you doing it or shall I do it?
I'll do it if you like, because I've got this revised list.
Okay.
Yeah.
Over to you then.
Okay. Councillors, if you could just indicate how you wish to vote. Councillor Zambrose-Smith?
For.
Councillor Bailey?
For.
Councillor Bates?
For.
Councillor Bowden?
For.
Councillor Bywater?
For.
Councillor Costello?
For, sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Count?
For.
Councillor Criswell?
For.
Councillor Cuffley?
For.
Councillor Downs?
For.
Councillor Dupre?
For.
Councillor Every?
For.
Councillor French?
For.
Councillor Giles?
For.
Councillor Goldsack?
For.
Councillor Harrison?
For.
Councillor Hay?
For.
Councillor Hickford?
For.
Councillor Hoy?
For.
Councillor King?
For.
Councillor Manning?
For.
Councillor MacDonald?
For.
Councillor Maguire?
For.
Councillor Machini?
For.
Councillor Nethsinger?
For.
Councillor Nito?
For.
Councillor Reynolds?
For.
Councillor Rogers?
For.
Councillor Sanderson?
For.
Councillor Shooter?
For.
Councillor Taylor?
For.
Councillor Tierney?
For.
Councillor Van der Ven? Oh, sorry, apologies. She's not with us. Councillor Wells?
For.
Councillor Whitehead?
Abstain.
Councillor Williams?
For.
Councillor Wilson?
For.
Councillor Wisson?
For.
Chairman, the result of the vote is 35 votes in favour, none against and 1 abstention. The motion is therefore carried.
Thank you. I think we still need to record formally that the all groups, Conservative, Labour, Lib Dem and Independent generally voted in favour of the motion, albeit there was one abstention on the Labour group. Can I have the confirmation from Councillor Count?
Yes.
Councillor De Singer?
Yes.
Councillor Massini?
Yes, it was the majority view on the Labour group that we should support this motion. However, the vote itself was free.
Thank you. And the independent group?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we both voted in favour.
Content, Mrs. Rowe?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes.
Yes. Right, colleagues, that now concludes the business on the agenda for today. So can I thank members for their contributions, and my apologies for a couple of proposers whom I forgot to bring back in. Thank you all. We've done quite well today, so appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Bye all.
Thank you.
Well
Back to
done,
the-
Max.